Now joining us to discuss the latest developments around the story is Inspecting Judge and retired Constitutional Court Justice Edwin Cameron. Justice Cameron, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition here on SABC News. You know, one would also ask, and perhaps maybe start here for our viewers and say that, you know, we wouldn't also not be here today had you not also then leaked initially that information to ground up. But initially you resorted to keep quiet. If you can just, you know, tell our viewers, why did you ultimately then leak that information, that very crucial information, to ground up?
Good evening, Mbali, and good evening to your viewers. It's a great pleasure to be with you. We decided at JIX to do our job, which is to investigate. We have no powers. I think this is not always clearly spelt out for those who are interested in the case. JIX has no powers over how any correctional institution in the whole country is run, and there are 240 of them. We have no powers over Mangaung. Our powers are to investigate and to report and to protect the rights of inmates. So we got news of something untoward that had happened at Mangaung. First of all, the head of our investigations, Mr. Leonard D'Souza, said to me, "This is strange, there's never been a death by fire in Mangaung." So we were on our guard from early on, but the information trickled into us and we passed it on to the Department of Correctional Services and to the police as we got it, and we also got information from the police. But the processes were, in my respectful view, far too slow. So by the end of September, I started confiding in a person in whom I have a very, very high degree of admiration for his integrity, Nathan Geffen, who's the founder and editor of Ground Up. Nathan, I may say in Bali, if you will allow me, he was for 10 years the treasurer of the Treatment Action Campaign through all the crucial fights after 2000, securing prices for ARVs and fighting President Mbeki's AIDS denialism that many people forget. So he's running this non-profit, and I know that he does so with utmost integrity. So I say to Nathan in the course of late September, this is really weird. We don't know what's going on, but something extremely untoward is here. And the turning point for me was when Judge Nokuthula Daniso was sent by her judge president from the Free State, Judge Kagni Musi, to respond to a whistleblower's report from inside Mangaung. And she wrote to me on the 12th of October, and I didn't ask her permission. I didn't implicate her in it. I don't ask her to share responsibility. The responsibility is entirely my own. I shared her letter with disturbing findings. It was a private letter to me. I told her what I proposed to do, and I shared that with Nathan Geffen. About 3 weeks later, they published their first report. And eventually on the 15th of March, after many more reports and many more investigations, Ground Up let the big bomb burst, which was that Thabo Bester was out. He had escaped. The evidence that they had amassed with the help of members of the public who sent them photographs, who sent them snaps, who sent them information, indicated clearly that he had not died in the fire, but that he had escaped.
And now that we find ourselves here, Justice Cameron, last week in Parliament, you said that this whole saga is quite absurd. You know, what do you make of this actually taking place in South Africa?
We live in a country whose our democracy has disappointed the expectations of so many people, women, poor people, unhoused people, people without water. We are dumbfounded by the lack of accountability and responsibility of people in top positions, people who are paid to deliver services under the Constitution. So this really outstrips almost anything that any South African could have made up. The first time Ground Up published, Mbali, and I say this to you because a lot of people are now, they have the benefit of hindsight. And they also have a second benefit, which is the benefit of the armchair. At JIX, we were not in an armchair. We had our hands full of thousands of complaints we get every year, dealing with the department. And we didn't have the benefit of knowing what we now know. Ground Up's first report in Bali said there are 5 possibilities. The least likely possibility, number 5, is that Thabo Bester wasn't the body burnt and that he must therefore have escaped. The 4 possibilities that Ground Up at that point, after I'd given them the information I had at that point, were not that he'd escaped. So eventually we got to that conclusion. And Mbali, you asked me a good question. There aren't English or any South African words in any language to describe the outrage of what happened. That in one of the country's 3 most secure prisons, eBongweni, Kokstad, Pretoria C-Max, just a few kilometers, 60 kilometers from where we in Johannesburg are, and Mangaung Maximum. Those 3, and Bester was in the most secure wing of Mangaung Max. How on earth did this happen? And of course, the answer is very disquieting. It's like Mr. Khubulile Jainchi said in Parliament last week, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a process of degradation, loss of control, and rottenness. Rottenness, he used the word rottenness, and I endorse that word, and I use it again tonight. G4S must have lost almost entire operational managerial control and executive oversight over that prison, which they are paid 45 million a month. That's a vast sum. How many water pipes, how many houses, how many road potholes can you fill with 45 million a month? They paid a huge sum and they totally degraded and betrayed their responsibility.
Justice Cameron, when the story broke, many South Africans were really left shocked when these revelations came out. What does it say about, the integrity of our country's correctional services facility now that we find ourselves here, where in the top 3 prisons, we saw an escape of this magnitude?
It's a good question, Mbali, because of course, Ananias Mate escaped from Pretoria C-Max before they double-checked everything and upgraded it. That was quite some years ago. I don't know how many years ago. It was 10 or more years ago. But this escape didn't occur with just the collusion of 1 or 2 warders, as we suspect happened at Pretoria C-Max with Mate. It must have happened with mass collusion. It had to have been that there were 23 G4S staff on duty that night. The way it all happened meant that there must have been widespread intimidation, blackmail, payoffs, or collusion by almost all the members of staff. G4S thought that they'd got away, that they'd kidded the public by disciplining 3 members, sacking 3 members of their staff. No, G4S, you didn't get away with that, because the widespread collusion at operational level, but much more than that, there must have been collusion right up the pipe to the top hierarchy at some level. I don't know which, I'm not accusing anyone, but there cannot have been just operational level collusion and corruption. That we must now find out, how wide it got, whether it infected the oversight officers employed to manage the contract on site at Mangaung. Those are officers of the Department of Correctional Services, and who else in the region, in the Free State Northern Cape region. We don't know yet.
And you're certainly right, Justice Cameron, because we have heard over the past couple of days that it seems as if there are many people involved in Thabo Bester's escape. Do you think that we'll ever get to the bottom of this matter?
I do think so. I'm a lawyer, and let me tell your viewers, Mbali, that Last week in Parliament was a remarkable experience. I've been cross-examined once in a court of law when I testified against a fraudster. And then I've been cross-examined at the Judicial Services Commission, which is happening this week with some of my fellow judges. But this is the first time that I've been subjected to 5+ hours of cross-examination. That parliamentary committee was on absolutely top form. They were well prepared from all parties, DA, EFF, governing party, ANC. And they asked questions which broke open the truth, exposed the culpability of G4S, and also showed us up. I include myself, showed me up, showed the minister up, showed the National Commissioner up. And that's a long way of answering your question, Mbali, but I wanted to say those things as well. I believe that with the legal processes under our Constitution, with the officers of the law doing their job properly, we will get to the bottom of this.
All right, thank you very much. Of course, that is Inspecting Judge and retired Constitutional Court Justice Edwin Cameron there, just giving us his insights. You would also remember that he was one of the people that actually leaked this information to Ground Up, and hence why we find ourselves here today, of course, with those reports coming out from that expose.